begin the current Daf Sotah Daf Yomi. We begin the third parak in Sotah parak Hayanaitel, which continues the theme of the previous parak Yomei to Hayanaitel, which again is we're talking about her mincha, about bringing it to the Beis Hamikdash in these mincha Sotah, the minchas kenois that the Sotah brings. Just goes to Bazalakal Zechneskel, turn to Daf Yomi. Today's Daf. So we discussed in today's Daf our minchas Sotah regarding the criterion of this mincha, of what we do with it. A machlekes regarding, are we mashka va'achkach makaves minchasa? Does she drink this meisayta and then do we sacrifice our mincha, or is it actually makaves minchasa va'achkach mashka? They actually first sacrifice the mincha and then we have our drink. The halacha of shirishume nikr, that the it had to be that. And what do we do with a case if the roisham of the writing is still recognizable in the Megillah? Oimeras eni sheisa. Regarding a case if she says I don't want to drink, then we actually force her to drink. When do we say that halacha? Also, the differentiation between the kahadra b'machmas resisa, if she's backing up because she's trembling, or the kahadra b'machmas because of confidence, she doesn't want to. We'll see there's a difference regarding what is it, the reason why she's backing out. So we begin the current Daf Yomi, third parak, hoya noitel. So the husband would take, and as Rashi says, because we know that it's talking about the husband, because the halacha is the mitzvah of kahuna by menachas only starts from kemitza, from taking the fistful and onwards. And so too, hagasham, bringing it near to the corner of the mizbech, is the beginning of kemitza, because a non-kohen cannot come to the mizbech. But regarding what we're discussing right now, what's called kedushas kli, sanctifying the vessel and pouring in the oil and mixing it that you need when you need oil, those are all kosher with a non-kohen. So this is talking about the husband. So he would take her flour offering mitich kfifa mitzchis, as we spoke about in the previous parak, from this wicker basket that they would bring it in, specifically a very degraded type of a vessel. And they would put it into a service vessel. And then, v'noisna al yada, so then they put it on her hand to do the waving ceremony, what's called the tenufa. The kohen would put his hands beneath the woman's hands, umanifa, and they would wave it. Gemara is going to learn out that tenufa requires both the hands of the bailim, which in this case, by the mechasaita, that's the woman, and the hand of the kohen beneath hers. Then, heinif, they would wave it. Then, as this picture illustrates, vehigish, then they would bring it to the southwestern corner, as we learned in the third parak in Masechtas Menachos, second Daf Yomi, which all of these are written by the Mechasaite, Tenufa, Hakrava, which means not sacrifice, but Hakrava means to bring it near, which is Hagasha, Kemitza, which is taking the fistful, and the Haktara, which is then you go and you burn that on the Mizbeach. So that's these four things we're talking about. Heinif, they would wave it. The Hegish, they come and bring it to the corner. Kamatz would take the fistful, and the Hikter, and then they would burn it on the Mizbeach. V'hashar, nechel kahanim. And the rest was eaten by the Kahanim, because any mincha that you take a fistful, the shirayim, the leftovers are eaten, like it says, toiras, by stam mincha. It says, v'zois toiras a mincha, until ba'an neseres mimena, which we learn that all menachos, the leftovers are eaten. Now, hayimashkam, so first, says the Tanakama, she would drink the meisaita, the Megillah, that scroll that was erased, and she would drink that water. And then they would sacrifice her mincha. Shigmar is going to ask, you just told me the hiktir, the last thing you mentioned in the procedures, you said that they burnt the kaimitz. So what are you doing, Yaakov, more after the haktara? You already told me you did this, and then you're saying Hayamashka. Well, what's Achkach Markaves Menchasa? Gemara is going to explain that. But Rabbi Shimon, he disagrees. He says, no. Markaves Menchasa first. First they would bring her mincha, V'achkach Hayamashka, and then she would drink. Because it says in the Pasuk of Midbar. V'acher, and then after that, Yashke Asa Isha Asamayim, the woman would drink the water. Which the Gemara is going to explain the Machlekes Rabban Rabbi Shimon from Sukkim. But Rabbi Shimon does agree that im hishka v'achkach chikav minchas, if she did drink first and then they brought near her mincha, then keshera, then it is going to be valid. Now, Amalei Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Yeshua the Dare. Rabbi Lazar said to Rabbi Yeshua of his generation, which Rashi points out, he was an Amoira. He was in the generation of Rabbi Lazar ben Padas, who is Rabbi Lazar. because there was another Rabbi Yishia, who was a Tana, who we mentioned many times in Shas, who is the disputant of Rabbi Yonason that we bring throughout the Gemara. So that's why the Gemara is saying, he said to Rabbi Yishia of his generation, don't say it was a reference to Rabbi Yishia HaZaken, because it wouldn't be appropriate for him to tell him like this, because he was elder and greater than him. So rather, it was just to Rabbi Yishia of his generation. It says, don't sit on your feet until you explain to me the following teaching. Which was the first step we spoke about in our Mishnah. Where do we know by the Saita Mincha Shatu'un Tenufa that has to be waved? So on that he responded, but Nolan, where do we know this from? What do you mean, Behainif? But the Torah explicitly says that you wave it. No, my question was, Bebailam and Nolan. That, how do you know that the woman should be waving it with the kohen? Because the pasuk is talking about by the kohen. It says, the kohen is going to take it from the hand, as we have over here in pasuk of Hey. It says, so where do you get this idea that the woman has to have her hands there too? Oh, so it says, that's as yad mishlamim. There we have a gzera shava, the word yad, from shlamim, by the waving of the chaz of a sheikh, by the breast and the thigh, by the murim of the shlamim, because ksivach, it says over here, the kohen is going to take it from the hand of the woman. Uksivasam says, that his hands will bring it, which that's by the bailam, and that's actually by tenufa, by the shlamim. So makan kohen, just like over here by the site, it says kohen by the tenufa of the mincha aflaan kohen. So over there by shlamim, it requires a kohen. No, also you could say that the other way, malal babalim, just like over there by the shlamim, it's the owner doing the tenufa of kambalim. So over here by the saita, she's doing the tenufa. So haketzad, which one? You tell me the gzeish both ways, that it's the bailam and that it's the kohen. Says the Gemara, because maniach yodei tachas habayil mamain. If the way it's done, yes, both by saita and by shlam, although each one is saying one and not the other, they actually need both. The kohen puts his hand beneath the hands of the owner, and that's how they wave it. And the Mishnah said, Heinif vehegish. It said, okay, they do the waving, they bring it to the corner of the mizbeach, comets, they take the festival, v'chul, etc., and then they amak there, and then they burn the kaimets. And then it said, Hayamashke v'achkach markaves minchasa. The Tana Kama said she would drink, and then it would bring her mincha. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Ha'akrava, you already brought it before you had her drink, because the Mishnah, a line before, said, Kamatz v'hikter, and then it says, Hayamashke. Says the Gemara, Hachakama. No, you have to read the Mishnah like this. The Reisha that said, Heinif, v'hegish, Kamatz, v'hikter, that's not specifically before she drank, because the Mishnah there is not talking about the drinking at all. It's just talking about the order of the hakrava of the menchasaite, which went in that order. First waving, then bringing to the corner, and then taking the fistful, and then burning. And now the Mishnah is coming to tell us when they're going to do this hakrava, and they would take it first from the kefiva mitzchas, etc., etc. So say the menachas ketzad. So what's the order of the mincha? Oh, it was like this. Heinif, Hegish, Komatz, Vehikter, and Vashanach Lakam, the rest was eaten by the Kana. Then the Mishnah Rebbe tells us what is first boss. Ubashka, Gufa, Pligi, Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. But regarding the drinking itself, that's the Machlekes of Shimon Rabbanan. Or the drinking is before all these, or all these is before the drinking. But we were just telling you the order of all these things, because they would bring it from the Kfifa Mitzchas, which we spoke about in the previous parak. Once we started, so we said, oh, this is the whole procedure, but which one's first? That's a machlekes. The Rabbanan said, the Rabbanan held mashka v'achkach markaves mechasa. First you have a drink, and then you do all these ceremonies, all these elements of the mincha. But Rabbi Shimon Sova held no markaves mechasa v'achkach mashka, because Shneim, like we said in the Mishnah, v'acher, that it says after all these things, then yashka, then you have a drink. Now the Gemara goes into detail. The Mishnah said according to Rabbi Shimon, v'im hishka v'achkach hirkaves mechasa. Although he said that, as we just quoted right now, that first you do the mincha and then you have her drink, he did agree to the chachamim that if she did drink, and then they brought the mincha, it's going to be kasha. So a little bit more complex as we continue to Amud Beis. Tan Rabbanan, the Gemara ultimately is going to be explaining these different opinions of the Mishnah. But just to take a look over here for a moment, that there are these different psukim that it mentions, and the Gemara is going to go into detail regarding what are these times. So you have Pasuk Chav Daled through Chav Zayin over here. So it says, just to read it over here, V'hishka se'isha, me'amarim, ha'ma'orim, ha'ba'am, ha'mayim, ha'marim, la'marim. So it says V'hishka. Then you have in Pasuk Chafei, it talks about being makriv the mincha in Pasuk Chafei. Then you have Pasuk Chavav. And then she's going to drink the water. And then you have Pasuk Chavav, the hishkes hamayim. She's going to drink the water. So this is where the Gemara is going to try to figure out all these drinkings. Why does it say these times? What was first? Because we have a Chav Daled before Chafei, before the Mincha, and then we have Achar Yashka that sounds like it's after that. So this is going to be the discussion of the Brisa, which is going to elaborate on this Machlek as we mentioned in our Mishnah. So turn upon, we learn in the Brisa. Like we said, as Rashi it tells us, the order of the Psukim is that it says v'kasav, to write the scroll. It says a macha, to erase the scroll. The hishka, to have her drink. And v'heinif hamincha, to do the tnufa. And v'hikriv, which means hagasha, to bring it near the corner of the mezbeach. And v'kamatz, to then take a fistful. And v'hiktan, and to burn it. And then it says v'achar yashkes isha samayim, and then the woman is going to drink the water. Then it says a third hashka, the hishkes amayim, and b'hoisim nitbis v'goymer. So as we had illustrated with the psukim, that's the order of what the psukim tell us here in these 4 psukim. So that's what Rabbi Kiva comes to tell us. V'hishka, when it says v'hishka es ha'isha, which that's the first pasuk we quote over here in pasuk of Daled, that it's written before Haktaras Amincha pasuk Chavhei. What's that first vishka coming to teach us? What's the question? But it already says after the burning of the mincha, the hishka, like Rashi quotes, he actually quotes the third one, the one in pasuk of Zayin, the hishka samayim, which that one is specific and not the first one. Why? How do I know that the pasuk of Zayin one is the primary? That you're asking me, what do I need the first one for? It's a little bit complex. You have to look up a little bit, because in pasuk Chav Vav it says va'achar yashkes isha. So obviously I know the drinking is after the burning of the mincha. So I know the pasuk of Zayin is primary, because Chav Vav is already telling me that it's going to be after the mincha being burnt. So my question then is, says Rabbi Kiva, so what does the first vehishka esa isha after the mechika come to teach me? Because what do I need it for? It's not before the mincha being sacrificed anyway, because Chav Vav and Chav Zayin tell me that it's going to be afterwards. Oh, says Rabbi Kiva, I'll tell you what it's teaching me. She'im nimchaka megillah, because if the scroll is erased, vaymeres eini shaisen, she says, I'm not drinking, and I'm not admitting that I'm tamei, I just don't want to drink. In other words, we open up her mouth against her will, and we pour the water into her throat, and we forcibly make her drink. Now, even if the scroll was erased before the mincha was sacrificed, because that's where Pasach Abdalat is, meaning that the Kahanim did inappropriately, because since she's not drinking until after the mincha was already burnt, they shouldn't have erased it, because whatever ability we have to delay the erasing, we try to delay it, because if she admits. Even so, since it was erased, even though it was inappropriate, we don't listen to her to say she's not going to drink. Rather, either you have to drink, or you have to admit. And that's why it says Vehishka, the first time in Pasuk Abdal, after when it talks about the erasing. Because she's not drinking right away until after it's burnt, but what it's coming to teach us is that the erasing will cause her to drink. That's the Rabbi Kiva. That's what he says. You learn out from that first time. Behishka esa isha. Rabbi Shimon Omer, he says, "V'achar yashke matam alayma." He wants to know that what are you learning out from the third pasuk, the pasuk of Vav, the second time it mentions. What's that coming to teach us? Because as Rashi explains, not that he's disagreeing with Rabbi Kiva. Rather, Rabbi Kiva was darshaning one pasuk, which was pasuk of Dalad, and he's darshaning pasuk Chavav, as the Gemara tells us later on, the Chav Mabez, that they both hold Markav minchasa v'achakach mashke. That the primary is, like we say, v'achar yashke, that first you do like Pasach Havei, you burn the mincha, and then she drinks. So they both agree to that principle. Therefore, Chavdal, you have to know what it's coming to teach, which that's what Rabbi Kiva is darshaning. And Reb Shimon is just coming to tell us what does Pasach Chavav come to teach of Achayashka, because I already know from Pasach of Zayin, but like Kvar Nemar, already says in the third Pasach, Vehishka, which is drinking the water after we already spoke about Taktar and Pasach Havei. So again, they're both saying the same thing. He's just darshaning what do you do with Pasach Chavav now. Rabbi Kiva said what do you do with Pasach Avdal? Because they're both agreeing that Chav Zayin comes after Chavei. So Ella, rather, it's coming to teach you that la'achar kol maisim kulam hamuran lamala. That after everything that was spoken about before, what was spoken about before, her taking, the giving of the oath, her accepting of the oath, the writing of the Megillah, the racing of the Megillah, the Kemitza, the Haktar of the Mincha. After all of those things, only then does she drink. So Maggid, this comes to tell you that Gimel Dvarim, these three things are ma'akvin bar, are critical, which is the burning of the kaimitz, the taking the oath, and the erasing of the scroll. Shimon Lenin is going to ask obviously the erasing is integral because before you erased it, what is she drinking? But these three things, actually karav kaimitz, if the kaimitz wasn't burnt yet, actually if the scroll wasn't erased, actually to kabbalah shvur, she didn't accept the oath, then she can't drink yet. So the Gemara explains, until the kaimitz wasn't burnt yet, Reb Shimon goes according to his reasoning, that the Amad that he says, Makrib es min chasa, he holds, as we said in the Mishnah, he's supposed to first burn the sacrifice to mincha, v'akach mashke, and then they drink. Now, the Gemara, however, asks, on one of the other things, you said, actually, nimcha Megillah. She can't drink until the scroll is erased. Says Gemara, obviously, where is she going to be drinking? So Ravashi says, no, what we needed to tell you for is where l'sherishumay nikir. If the remnants was recognizable in the scroll, with Allah is you have to go back and erase again until the rishim is not nikir. So that's what we're telling you, that halacha is osama akiv. So even though you erased it, if the rishim is nikir, then so there's something to drink, but then it's not going to be valid. And the third thing was actually the kabbalah shvua. If she didn't accept yet the oath, so then that's also not going to be able to allow her to drink. So the Gemara asks a question, says, wait a second, it sounds like that mishtahu deloy shasya. Sounds like that she can't drink hamechtav kasvila, but it sounds like that the kohen could write the scroll before she accepts the oath. You just can't drink. But that seems to be difficult. But Amar Rava says on the Gemara on Daf Yudzayin Mebeis, Megillah Sotah Shekasava. Regarding the scroll, let's say it was written kohen should the kabbalah shvu before she accepted the oath. Lo yasav lo klum. Nothing was done. Why? Because when it writes in the pasuk v'chasav es ha'olos to write the curse, that's written after the accepting of the oath. So why you tell me that she can't drink it? You can't even write the scroll before accepting the oath. So the Gemara says you're right, Kedin Asva, that it was written unnecessarily, because even the writing cannot be done, you're right, let alone the drinking. But then the Gemara now asks a question on the Mishnah. The Brisa that we said first was coming to tell us, where does Reb Shimon know his reasoning from? And the Gemara wants to know now, according to the Rabbanan, how do they darshan the psukim? And how does Reb Shimon darshan all the different psukim? Meaning, says the Gemara, regarding what are we disagreeing about in our Mishnah? Meaning, we had mentioned in length of these different psukim, so now the Gemara wants to know how we're going to explain these, the source of their machlekes. So the Gemara says like this, there are three psukim that we mentioned. There's vehishka kama, as we pointed out in Pasuk Chav Daled, vehishka seisha. You have v'achar yishka that's in Pasuk Chav Vav, and you have vehishka basra the last time in Pasuk Chav Zayin. So the Gemara explains. Rabbanan hold vehishka kama. The first time it mentions hishka before the haktara and Pasuk Chav Hei of the mincha. That's this specific one. That's legufa. That's teaching you the halacha. Oh. So that's shemashke v'achar makar bes mincha. So that's you can have a drink, and then you're going to be makar the mincha, like it says in the next pasuk. Now, although it says in pasuk of the pasuk after that, it says v'achar yashke, that after that she's going to drink, which sounds like that first you're makar and then you have a drink. No, obviously from the first pasuk, which we're saying is teaching you the primary halacha, which is the pasuk of Daled, must be that the psukim that I mentioned after that are extra to make drashas. So therefore, must be the first pasuk was the primary one to tell you that first you drinks and then you makar the mincha. And obviously, when it says v'achar yashke, although it's sounding like that only after the haktara, no, must be before the haktara. Wait a second, but it says v'achar. Must be that the achar yashke is not going on the haktara and pasuk of A, must be going on the erasing, which was written before that. So what's that coming to teach? So what's v'achar yashke? I know it's after the racing. It's written after the racing. No, it's necessary for when the remnants of the writing are still recognizable in the scroll, and the Rabban are saying that if it wasn't erased well, you cannot have her drink the water. And then what do you do with v'hishka basra, which the last time it says v'hishka, it's also before the haktara. It's written a few psukim after that. It must be to tell you a drasha. What's the drasha? Shem nimcha Megillah, that if the scroll is erased, and she says, I'm not going to drink, that we force her and she has to drink even against her will. That's what the last hishka is coming to teach you according to the Tanakama. That's what the hishka says as a mind that we're going to force her to drink. That's according to Tanakama. Now, Rabbi Shimon, what does he hold? He says like this. The pasuk and pasuk chav vav, that's legufay. That's teaching you the primary halacha. That sounds specific because it's telling you after this, which was everything we said of the komats and everything. Only then does she drink. Now, obviously, the writing of the Megillah is only after you burn the mincha to tell you shemakaves minchasa. First, you bring the mincha, and then she drinks, which because they're all ma'akev. The burning of the mincha, the reshumay cannot be nicker, which is where we learn this all out from, that they all have to come before the drinking. It says, and only v'achar yashka. Now, what do you do with hishka kama then? What do you do with the first pasuk? Now, that's the difference. Meaning that sounds like that's actually before the mincha. Oh, that's actually the source that we said in the Mishnah that Rabbi Shimon agrees that if you do the opposite order, Shemhishka, that if you actually give it a drink first, and then you brought the mincha, which even though you're not supposed to, that Rabbi Shimon said in the Mishnah, like shere will be valid. What do you do with the last time? V'hishka bascha pasuk chav zayin. Oh, that teaches you she'im nimcha Megillah, that if the scroll is erased, which specifically after the aktacha, because we're talking about where it was erased appropriately. V'amra eini shaysin, she says, I don't want to drink. Ma'aranaysa. We force her mouth open, we force her to drink, which says Rashi, that's actually the difference between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shimon. Because according to Rabbi Kiva, he doesn't hold that if you gave her to drink and then you mark of the mincha, that's going to be kosher. So that's why he darshans the first vehishka to darshan for the halacha bal karcha. That even though it was inappropriately erased before the haktara, like it's written in that order, and actually, the achar yashke, he darshans for the halacha of that it's a problem if the reishim is still nicker. And the last vehishka teaches you the halacha itself to say that you makav the mincha and then your mashka, which was not like the way we said for Reb Shimon, because this is what they're disagreeing about on this halacha of if it was nimchika and she says I don't want to drink, that according to Rabbi Kiva, he won't hold imhishka v'akav hikav minchasa, that's going to be kosher. He doesn't hold to that drasha of the first pasuk like Reb Shimon does, and therefore that's why that's the difference between them. Now the Rabbanan, who they disagree in the primary halacha of drinking first being the ikr, that they don't darshan the way Reb Shimon does, because b'di'evet le'pasach kra. The pasuk is not going to open up with a b'di'evet at like what's not the primary mitzvah. Rather, it starts in the way it's supposed to be. And the later psukim are going to make drashas. So therefore, that's why they say that no, If the first pasuk is saying v'hishkas ha'isha, must be that's the gufoy, that you mashke v'achkach makav es menchasa. Not like the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who said, no, it's telling you b'di'evet, if you did it that order. No, we wouldn't start the opening pasuk with it b'di'evet. Now the Gemara asked the question on the brayso we brought before. Does Rabbi Kiva really hold mashke noisa malkocha? Do we actually make her drink forcibly, as we quoted him as saying that in one of the psukim that he darshan? But Vatanya, when the brayso of Yehuda says kalavois, which had two prongs, which they would put in her mouth vertical, shel barzlav arin matilin l'techpiyah, they would put into her mouth, like what these dentists do. Shem nimcha megillah, because if the scroll is erased, v'amren, she says, "Ein yishayis, I'm not drinking." Ma'ara naisa umashken es bakar, they would force her to drink. Amr B'Kiva, and this is whose opinion we want to elaborate on. He says, "Kolom on the tzrichin lebayitko. What do we need to do already? We just need to inspect her if she's toira or tameya. V'lo beduka ve'medis, but she's already inspected, because if she's saying I don't want to drink, she's obviously admitting that she's tamei. Ella rather, says Rabbi Kiva, actually kara b'koimitz, if the fistful wasn't sacrificed yet, so she could back out and she said I don't want to drink, and we don't force her because she's admitting that she's tamei. If the koimitz is already sacrificed, then she cannot go ahead and back out anymore, and to say that at that point already, she can't back out. So the Gemara asks and says, wait a second. So you're asking from Rabbi Kiva that it sounds like he says that we don't force her to drink. That's what the Tanakh that was saying, that we open up another. This is what we need to check her for. She's obviously she's obviously tamei. It says the Gemara, according to reasoning, tikshalach gufa. But I mean, how do you understand Rabbi Kiva's own teaching? He said, mishakara by koimitz. Once a koimitz is sacrificed, then she cannot back out. What do you mean she can't back out? What do you mean we're going to force her to drink? But I thought she's already we already verified it by the fact that she's backing out. So I rather like kasha. It's not difficult. Why? Because this that you're differentiating, if they already burnt the kemitza, is the gahadra machmas resisa. If she's backing out because of that she is trembling. But over here is talking about the kahadra machmas briyusua. When did we say that there's no difference, because she's b'duka v'medis if she's backing out healthily, she's not trembling, and she says I'm not going to drink. Okay, so obviously you're tameya, and therefore that's why she's not trembling, because she always was going to rely on the fact that when it comes time to drink, I'm not going to drink. And you're right, and it doesn't make a difference if it was karav or or wasn't karav. She's not going to drink, as we explained. Because this is what he's saying. Whatever is because of health, there's no point in having her drink, even if the kaimetz was already sacrificed. This that he said, he's differentiating Rabbi Kiva between if the kemitza was sacrificed or not, is when she's backing out machmas resisa, because she's trembling. We see her trembling. We could say that she doesn't believe that the water is not going to check her out, even though she's really tahira, and she really wants to rely on her tahara and to drink. So therefore, she's trembling, and when it comes time to drink, she just can't do it. So that's what we're saying. If the fistful wasn't sacrificed yet, where the scroll wasn't erased yet, or even if it was erased, but and this is what he disagrees with Rabbi Shimon, as we mentioned before from Rashi. If the Khan did it inappropriately that they erased, okay, but then she could back out. But once the fistful was already sacrificed, the bedin of it that the Khan did appropriately that they erased it, then she cannot back out anymore. And that answers the question, because the first brisa that said ma'ara noisa, when do we force her, is because of risusa, because she was trembling. But if not, you're right, we wouldn't force her because she's already admitting her guilt. So what's the point of forcing her? She's beduka ve'medis. When do we force her to drink? It's okay, look, Shefel, it's already erased, and the kemitza was already sacrificed, and looks like that you might be tahar, go ahead with it. And we forced her to drink because anyways it was already erased. But the Gemara has a question as we turn to Chafam and Aleph, where you have Kasha Rabbi Kiva. We have a difficulty contradicting Rabbi Kiva himself, because Hassam in the first brayso Amai says Mechika Ma'akva, the erasing is Ma'akiv the forcing, meaning we said as long as it wasn't erased, if she says I'm not going to drink, she could back out, and we don't force her to drink. But if the scroll was already erased, then we would force her. That was the first brayso that we said earlier, even if the kametz was not sacrificed, because, like we said, the first vehishka is before the aktara, and for that is what we darshan it for, to teach you that we're going to force her. So that's even before the kmitza. But v'hacha here in the second brayso, Omar kametz ma'akiv, we're saying that the kmitza is ma'akiv, the forcing her, as long as the kmitza wasn't sacrificed. If she says I'm not going to drink, we don't force her to drink, even if the scroll was erased. Says the Gemara, okay, obviously traits and Rabbi Kiva must be a machlekes tanoma called Rabbi Kiva. Which one is it when we see machames chesisa that we're going to force her to drink when she's trembling? Is it the scroll being erased, or is it the kmitza being sacrificed? But Ibai there's the following question. Let's say she says I'm not drinking in a healthy, confident way. But then and then she goes back and says, you know what, I want to drink. According to Rabbi Kiva, what's the halacha to let her drink willingly? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. Again, this is according to Rabbi Kiva. Since I'm not going to drink, so Rabbi Kiva considered, but we said there's no point in forcing her. She was basically, I'm tamei. She wasn't trembling. Basically saying, I'm tamei, I don't want to drink. Now, once she's already presumed to be tamei, but she can't back out and not drink. You're already tamei, you're already out. I did, well, maybe no. Since she says, I want to drink, so Galia Daita, she's revealing her intention. The machmas be tusodamra. Obviously, although we didn't see it, some people have a good poker face. Maybe she really was trembling. Maybe she was afraid. So it says it's not clear if she could then back out and then say, "Yeah, I want to drink," after she already confidently was saying, "I'm not going to drink." Now, Amar Avu the Shmuel just ends off with a halacha. So tzorch shitin mar. You have to put something bitter l'teichamayim into the water. My time, what's the reason? Because the Amakar the pasuk says mehamagim, the bitter waters, means shemagim kvar. They're already bitter, meaning before as a race, it was already called that the mayim amagim, that it says you race the scroll into the bitter waters. Obviously, it's for something else that they're bitter. I mean, you can't just say they were bitter waters because of the curse that's going to check out the woman and cause her so much trouble, because before they're racing, it can't check her out. So obviously, actually, you have to put something bitter in the waters to go ahead and make it into the mayim amagim, and then the race the Megillah inside of it. Thank you to any time for hosting us.